Welcome to another episode of Mr. Therapist and the Counselor Podcast. We are your guide to personal recovery, whether you're dealing with an addiction, a mental health issue, maybe you're just trying to figure some things out in life. We empower you through raw conversations and demystifying the process of therapy. And we're the best mother podcast. No, we're the best recovery and
we're the best podcast from mothers too,
and recovery podcasts out there. Let's keep it clean for the kids. Jesse O.
Trick love the kids. Jesse O here. This week we're going to talk about personality disorders and sometimes how putting labels on things just makes us feel safe.
Yeah. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Here we go.
Let us here we go. Hey,
what's up?
What's up, Silky Smooth?
What's going on?
Oh my gosh, man!
Dude, I feel good.
So how was the audition for the group? Yeah. You know what's crazy? It was raining, right? And he went out in that shirt, but it dried in like no time. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I feel good, dude.
You look good, man.
Thank you. I've been doing like 75 hard. I'm day 10.
You sticking to your resolutions,
yeah, dude,
man. How many days is it?
It's like 10 days now, I think.
I'm impressed,
yeah,
man.
So
I left off one of the resolutions. I really was like,
what? You gave up on it?
No. I forgot to mention. I did not get a therapist yet.
I know, dude. I've been trying to call you out so bad.
Dude, you have called me out.
The part of me, my therapist self was like, just meet this guy where he's at, you know? And the other
That's
part
good.
of me was
I like that.
Should call this guy out in public.
You did.
Telemundo television.
Ooh. It's a good. We could be sponsored by Telemundo.
Yeah, we love Telemundo.
Yeah. It'd be awesome if we aired on that show.
Telemundo.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's another one that I have not. I need to really make a point to. Dude, we do Mr. Therapist and the Counselor. Dog. We're promoting like going to therapy, going to counseling, and I'm over here like, but I'm too good for it. So gonna call myself out. That is a resolution I'm gonna make. I'm gonna start going to therapy. So and stop talking about going to therapy. You know what? I was kind of rude. I didn't. We hadn't seen each other in a while. We recorded the episode that aired last week. I didn't even mention like how was your Christmas? How was your holiday? I mentioned it being like one of the most stressful holidays of all time based on some studies I read. But how did it end up being a good one for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, mental health wise, you know, I do get a little down around this time, right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
But
we talked about it earlier in the month, but like as it got closer, did it like?
No, this was a good Christmas, a good holiday season for me. I think I definitely felt like the pressure of like just so many, like the prices going up on so many things, dude.
Yeah, we mentioned that last time.
We came back from a party for New Year's, and my brother, my parents were watching my daughters, right? My brother's like, hey, like everyone wants Jack in the Box, like go get some before you come home. So I'm like, all right, I'll go pick up some Jack in the Box. I got 4 burgers, a couple fries. How much do you think it was?
$72.
It's $50, dude.
It's crazy.
For
I know
4 burgers,
I know
dude.
it is.
And
yeah.
I'm like, and so I get there. I was like, guys, this was $50. Everyone's like, no, dude, this was like $20 max. No, dude. So,
things are adding up.
So I felt that for sure. But yeah, it was a good holiday for sure. Thanks for asking, man.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, like, I noticed myself on Christmas Day, and I had talked to somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they had mentioned, like, I actually might have been my mom who said, like, maybe it wasn't. I don't know, but they said like you go through like a lot of different feelings on Christmas, and I did. Like I was almost like there's almost like after Christmas, there's kind of I feel like kind of a drop off. Like there's a big build up for me.
Yeah. And
it was a good day. I had a good holiday, but then I noticed that like after that, I was like I found myself kind of like bumming, like oh man, like it's kind of everybody's taking stuff down, and like it's back to reality, and it's like oh yeah, okay, so. Yeah. No more peace on earth. It's
like back. You said, like the freeway's a little clearer, right? Like you can, there's not as much people out doing things.
Yeah, so. It's a nice. I don't want to say it's not for everybody. It's calm, but for me, there's a calm and serene kind of feeling to it. But now it's like things are ramping back up, and it's like no more holiday. It's like it's time to get into action. So like
the most depressing part about this is that no football.
It's yeah.
some of us.
We're in playoffs, you know. Yeah. So yeah, for some of us, Charger fans, some of us Chicago Bear fans.
No football.
But yeah, so this week I'm wearing a hoodie, and next week I think I'll wear a hoodie as well. So it's hoodie January. But no, this is not what we're gonna.
The future.
Yeah, I got a feeling. I don't know what I'm wearing next week, but this week we wanted to talk about personality disorders. Let's start the clock, right? But not so much personality disorders.
Can you start the clock? Thank you, Clark.
Clark with the clock?
I don't know. Yeah, Clark's on the clock.
What about Patricia?
Oh, I always got my.
Old reliable. There you go. But we were like, let's talk about personality disorders. I think that would be like a good episode to kind of go through all the personality disorders. But it wasn't just about the personality disorders, but we wanted to talk about how like sometimes we hear certain personality disorders be thrown out. Some are very popular, like in media, but these labels are given to people.
Yeah.
And we're gonna discuss that as well. So, first off, let's go through like the different types of personality. We're gonna say what they are, what the personality disorders are. Do you want to do like the cluster A, cluster B, cluster C thing, or do you want to do however you want to do it?
I wasn't ready for this, but I will just kind of try to.
Rely on that silky shirt. Okay. All right, go for it.
But yeah, cluster A, we have paranoid, schizoid.
I feel like you're looking at something right now.
Schizotypal.
But your memory's solid. Keep going.
We got cluster A, paranoid, schizotypal personality disorders, right? Then we got cluster B, we got antisocial, we got borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders. And cluster C, we got avoidant dependent and obsessive compulsive personality disorders.
I wanted to ask you, I mentioned multi-personality disorders. No, multiple personality disorders. Like, you know, when you're like, what was that movie that had, it's called Split?
Oh, Split, yeah. Multiple personalities.
Yeah, what did I say?
You trying to sound smart there? I mentioned multi.
Yeah, I did say multi. I meant when you have multiple personality disorders, what is that? That's not what it's called anymore.
No, that is a dissociative identity disorder, actually. Okay. And it's categorized as a dissociative type of mental health disorder where people kind of come out of them. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, my series.
You found that on the way.
Yeah, but yeah, it's dissociation, right? And you're going through a trauma, and you try to like understand or go through the trauma in a way that you kind of dissociate from your body, and you start, sort of very complex way. Like you build different personalities within yourself. Yeah.
Have you, as a therapist, ever had anybody with that?
I've worked with someone who thought they experienced that, and I hadn't seen it, but they were pretty they were 100% sure that they've experienced that before.
Yeah, in the sense they felt like they were another person.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
They would call it like a switch. They were like, the switch happens at times.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So,
if you know this, we're gonna keep this on podcast. If you don't, we're gonna edit it out. Why is it called like cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C?
I don't know, actually.
You want to go to the old reliable internet on this one and just kind of go through it?
Yeah, we can do that. I don't have my phone.
That's okay.
Maybe you can.
I can pull up my phone.
But like just from looking at the clusters, I think we can talk about like the complexity of them. Like cluster A seems like they're very familiar to like a psychosis, dissociative type of disorder, right? Where people are you're either seeing things, you're hallucinating. So
I think you're on point. It says that the cluster A personality disorders involve suspicion of or disinterest in others.
Yeah.
So like as we mentioned, the paranoid one. What is the schizoid and schizotypal? What's the difference between that?
Wow.
I will tell you because I'm the smart one here.
If this was a test on 6 years ago, I would have told you. Yeah.
I guess schizoid is like emotional and social detachment.
Okay.
And then I guess is like as well as like a preference for isolation. Yeah. Where the schizotypal is like unusual ideas. It's hard to relate. Magical thinking, it says. So
cluster A, you're like if you're experiencing that, you're probably needing some sort of really intensive treatment, like an inpatient treatment center. you're trying to like find a way to function throughout life, find a way to like keep a job, maintain some sort of structure in your life in that way.
And then with cluster B personality disorders, it involved like erratic or overly emotional ways of thinking or behaving. It wasn't a joke, but I mean, I guess I've been like called. There's times when I'm like, I'm so antisocial, but like antisocial personality disorders is like very, very extreme. It's like,
think about what's Dexter kind of like.
Okay, yeah,
that's what antisocial. Yeah,
but that guy was like straight up. I don't know spoilers, but Dexter was killing people, right?
Yeah, antisocial could actually be very social people, right? Like,
right, but they just play a role, right?
Exactly.
So, okay, yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people use it as the avoidance personality disorder, right? Where they're just like, I don't talk to people. I don't really, I'm introverted, kind of a thing. Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, and then cluster C, I'll just kind of say this for the viewers that are not watching me read this, and they're just listening, but maybe all the above. But these disorders involve like high levels of anxiety or fearfulness. So, and then based on all the three that we mentioned, avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive disorder, right? So, I guess I want to ask you, as we start to discuss some of these personality disorders, based on all of them that we went through here, like what is the most common personality disorders as a therapist you've experienced? And I could tell you, even as a counselor, like what I've like probably run across the most.
Yeah, I would say, as a therapist, I don't run across these at all. Like not at all, but it's very uncommon when I do. Maybe borderline would be one.
Seems like always a very popular one.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe like a narcissistic personality disorder would be one.
Okay,
but that's probably it right there.
How about obsessive compulsive though? I would imagine you probably deal with like a lot of OCD type.
Well, those are two different things,
right?
Though.
Okay, so can you explain like what's the difference between explain the two?
Yeah, so I think it's one of them's a little more treatable, I guess they would say. Like,
say which one's treatable and say which one's not treatable.
Obsessive compulsive disorder is a different type of disorder. It's more. You all right there, buddy?
I just missed my mouth on the water. Yeah.
That water almost killed you, dude.
That's what happens when I'm staring deep into your freaking silky shirt. My gosh, I just missed my mouth. Let's start that over again. But let's say it again. So which one is like
obsessive compulsive disorder? You're gonna find more treatments around it, and people are gonna be more treatment respondent, I guess, right? Like you can find all these different mindfulness based ways to be able to treat it. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder is a little more harder to treat. And I don't understand really why, because I don't really work in that area.
Okay.
But I know that like it's the treatment resistance is a little higher on that. Yeah.
Okay. To your point, I think that probably what I experience the most as well is probably that. I hear borderline. I hear like narcissistic personality disorder. I think I might hear like paranoid personality disorder, but that could be also based on like drug use. Like if people are coming off of methamphetamines, I wouldn't dare diagnose somebody with a personality disorder. And I just mean because I just don't feel like it's in my realm. It's kind of out of my scope. But like, I remember I've had clients, I'm talking to a client, and sometimes when I talk to a client, I'll set my cell phone out just to like, I don't know, just because it's just, I want it out of my back pocket. I want to sit on it. So I said it. I remember one time I was talking to a client, and the client was like, hey, are you recording any of this? Or like, just like the paranoia of that. Yeah. But once again, that just might be based on like influenced by particular drug use, you know? So
yeah, very true. I mean, you see like psychosis. Sometimes it's even hard to like know what you're diagnosing, because especially if you're working in treatment, it's very short term, and you get a history of what they're like, but you're short term and they're in a different type of environment than they are outside, so it's hard to really like diagnose.
So this will help expand on our conversation, right? So do you always, I don't want to say trust, but I guess you have to trust like past like history, but a lot of times the past history is being told by the client, right? Yeah. So like and a lot of times people are poor historians. They don't tell the best, like most accurate experiences. So it is pretty hard to like give out some of these personality disorders because you're limited to what you're working with, unless for some, like, I guess maybe if you get a reference from somebody like, hey, I worked with this client, and you can get the consent, you call them and you talk about them, right? But a lot of times it's just based on that person that's sitting right in front of you, right? So it's kind of like you just got to go with what they got. I mean, you can observe them, you can kind of like try to understand from their interactions with other people, but I've always been like sort of against diagnosing, especially when I'm working in treatment, because I'm seeing someone for like 30 days, 45 days on average, and it's like it's really hard to throw that on them.
But like to your point earlier, like we hear a lot of that even among therapists. I don't know if you've experienced like therapists who will just like kind of almost like slap the label on someone and be like,
so let's go in that direction. So I notice so often that like when I working in the field, I work in the recovery addiction, as we've talked about so often, and like working in treatment centers, but I notice a lot of times like it's not even like therapists. I feel like sometimes counselors will pick up on it because it's like I almost feel like it's the thing to do of like you want to see like you want to suggest like what's going on, but like, oh yeah, they've got like they are they borderline? That's like a common one, right? Like, oh, they got to be borderline. Like we throw out this borderline like personality disorder like on people. Why do therapists do that?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask them to know. But
hell yeah, but I'm gonna ask this therapist right here, and your experience in talking to people. Like, why is it so important for us to put a label on what we're working with? Does it give us this like maybe at least an idea of like understanding it? Like, are we just trying to like connect, or are we protecting ourselves for what could come next? Because somebody who's borderline, right, it's like I love you or I hate you, right? Is that kind of like the mentality of a borderline personality disorder, right?
Yeah, very like impulsive, sort of like black and white kind of thinking, and I think like the meaning behind, or the purpose behind having a strategy or a process for diagnosing is because there's research around like what these diagnoses respond to treatment wise. So the reason behind it is really good. It's like, okay, if we can categorize someone that fits one of these diagnoses, maybe we can know like how to move forward, whether it's medication, the type of treatment to give, the amount of sessions might be good for them. But I also think that a lot of, like, in my experience, I think a lot of therapists, this is just my experience, like I don't know what's in their head, but I think a lot of people, the therapists and mental health professionals that I witnessed throwing those labels around, I felt like it was more about the therapist's experience almost feeling frustrated that they couldn't reach a client, right? And almost feeling like this guy's borderline, like I can't work with them, or like my interventions aren't working because they're borderline, or it's just sort of like,
so it's an excuse.
Yeah, it's kind of like an excuse. And to me, it's kind of like, okay, like I get you're frustrated, like you care about these individuals, you want your work, a little bit ego driven, maybe you want to be a good therapist, right? And you want your interventions to work, but like look at yourself a little bit. Like, is there anything like maybe you're doing that's like triggering or not reaching this client? We always talk about sometimes the client and therapist don't match, right? And so I don't know, to me, I was always very sensitive to when someone would slap that line. They're borderline, they got to be borderline. I'm almost like rolling my eyes like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to be humble and be like, I'm really struggling with
I don't know how
individual.
to reach this client. You know?
I know, dude, I feel like when you say that, like now I'm kind of going through my mind and hearing that so often, I think, it's kind of like, okay, I got an excuse not kind of like to fail with this one or not do well with this one. Because once again, I wouldn't be diagnosing people anyways, but I'm not really like, oh, they're borderline or they're narcissistic. I'm just kind of like, this person's troubled, or like I'm trying to just look at like patterns and behaviors, and really I'm just trying to seek some answers on how I can just help this person and support this person and challenge this person. But I think that's really like, I don't know, I'm kind of like I'm digging what you're saying right there.
And not everyone does this. I'm sure there are some therapists who like work with maybe like this subgroup of people and like these diagnoses, and they know like they can see one, they can diagnose one really fast because this is their level of expertise. But the ones I've encountered, the times I've encountered them, it was just kind of like, okay.
And also, I will say on that end as well, though, like I have people have to say like, yeah, they're borderline, almost kind of like, okay, maybe this is a better understanding of like why this is hard or why it's difficult, and they're kind of almost suggesting that like, yeah, it's been challenging for me to work with this person, but maybe at least some of these qualities will represent that, and I almost get a sense sometimes like, okay, because it's this, it is hard for you. Like I will try to be very open on what impacts me, like what clients are hard for me to work with some that are out of my scope, or some that maybe kind of like I have counter transference with, or trigger me, like. But I think I do hear the borderline thrown out a lot, and then sometimes I'm just kind of like, I feel like that's just like, I'm going to say that, and so this is why this person is going to be problematic, to where like I've seen some people are like, oh, they're borderline, and I'll be like, oh, okay, well, great, because I haven't really seen this yet, at least at that level, so like. And
it, like a part of me wants to speak even to the respect of the individual that's being labeled a borderline, right? Like, because, I mean, it's not like, I think we can get lost in depicting this person as borderline and then now writing them off like that. But this person has like needs, and they have pain, and like the behaviors that they're experiencing comes from a place of probably like a lot of fear, a lot of pain, a lot of emotional damage, a lot of trauma. And so it's like, it's hard to, I don't know, to just put it in a little box and say like, oh, this makes sense. Now I can justify that like they're not responding to treatment. They're just borderline.
Right.
It's like, dude, we're in the business of meeting people where they're at and helping them change. Like, come on.
Maybe to switch to another personality disorder. Before, when I mentioned like, hey, let's talk about personality disorders, you brought up like this concept of being a narcissist.
Yeah, dude, that's been popping up a lot. I don't know have you noticed that at all? Like people talking about mostly like guys being like narcissistic, like.
So I will say, like, there are these, like, certain, like, words that are very popular. I think gaslighting was, like, something I've heard, like, a very, like, overused phrase. And gaslighting is basically just a form of manipulation, trying to make somebody feel like they're the crazy one. You're the crazy one, but you kind of make the other person feel crazy. When I use the word crazy, I mean in the sense of just manipulation. Okay, so but like I have heard the word narcissist like used a lot. I think we even did the Jonah Hill podcast a while back, right? And like there were some narcissistic traits with him. So kind of just talk to me about like what you've heard from the media, what stood out to you, and why'd you want to discuss this here on.
I want to start out by like I'm going to try to say this without being insensitive, because I don't ever want to be insensitive to people's experience, But
that is such a therapist thing to say. Yeah,
and I have my own biases, and
why are you so biased?
Because I'm a human being, dog.
Oh, that was kind of straight up answer. Okay, I got nothing behind that.
Yeah, I'm a man. I'm a human being. I come from a traditional culture, so I have a lot of biases that are moving me, but. I think where it frustrates me the most when I see this is around, I see a lot of where their relationship is like, there's an abusive relationship, or whether it's emotional or physical, right? And the person who's maybe being abused, like, will post about like being in a narcissistic relationship, or like, my partner's a narcissist and it's, I can't stand it. This is really hard for me. And so it doesn't irk me, like, because I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be labeling. It's just like it irks. What irks me is like the use of these terms being kind of like, used so loosely, right? And so I'm like, okay, so this person is probably being emotionally abused or physically abused, and that's kind of what they're talking about. That doesn't mean that the person that they're with is a narcissist. It just I think I just have concern over the mass misuse of these terms, and we take them so lightly. It's hard for even a professional to diagnose someone who's a narcissist. Like, how can the common person just do it, right? Yeah.
I think it's, once again, it maybe just goes back to not just only like therapists or people working in the mental health field, but like I think a lot of times if we could kind of figure it out, we feel safe. Like the label that is very popular would be like addicts and alcoholics, right? So like, I think when people they get almost at peace in the sense of like, oh, my dad was an alcoholic growing up, and that's why he was the way he was, and that gives us some clarity, and maybe almost some relief to where we can be like, all right, so now that I know this, I can heal. So maybe that's what maybe the overused term is, that like, I know why this relationship failed, or why this person treated me so poorly, and it's like I'll call them a narcissist. But I think it is a term sometimes, like, because what does it mean to be a narcissist, right? It means like you're just really so self-involved. You don't take any advice, you don't take any feedback, you're not open-minded, you're just all about yourself, right? You're selfish, I guess. Right. So and maybe just an extreme volume of that. So do you feel like you've ever really met a true narcissist?
I don't think so. And again, I maybe I'm just like so fucking open-minded, because even if I were to run someone who's very much about themselves, like I would wonder, I would be curious about that. I'm like, I wonder if this person is just really confident. I wonder if this person doesn't get to talk about themselves a lot. I wonder if this is like a comfortable space for them. Like I don't take an interaction and go, this always happens everywhere that this person goes. I'm like, I take into the fact that like, hey, I'm a therapist. They're in a therapist office, or they know I'm a therapist. You know, or this guy just likes to talk about themselves. This is how they socialize. But there's so many other contexts. Like you got to look at relationships, relationship history. You got to look at like, how are they at work? Are they, how are their friendships? It's like there's so many things that you got to look at to know, right? It makes me think about, though, like when I was working at a family program, we would give these classes around substance use, what it meant, to teach the families like what recovery was, what to expect once someone left treatment. And whenever, sometimes the advice or the education we would give would not like a family member wouldn't take it the right way, right? And we would have like sessions to try to like help them accept or see kind of what we're talking about. And to me, I always like felt good about someone just having their perspective and my perspective. If they don't see it, that's okay. Like that's fine. We don't need to change their mind. But I remember some of the people I work with, they would label them narcissists. They're just narcissists. They're not gonna understand. And again, going back to that idea of like writing somebody off because they won't take your feedback or your advice or what you're saying. I think that's a little egotistical of us as therapists or mental health professionals to just assume that they got to take our advice, or otherwise they're like narcissists or borderline or stubborn, whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree with you a lot on that. So I think once again, kind of just to cover, like, I think the labels are so. It's just, it puts people, I think, in a safe place, which is like I said, in some ways, like to gain some clarity, I think it's so helpful. But we just got to be aware sometimes of these words that we're using, like, because, like, I don't know. I've heard people say, if you call somebody borderline, even though I've had some clients say like a diagnosis has helped them. I've had people say like to know that I have like severe depression was like, that was helpful.
Validating.
Exactly. Very validating to know like what is going on with me. But with some personality disorders, it can really like impact like how they see themselves. I don't know if I've told this story before, but I used to, growing up, I would look at myself in car mirrors a lot, like windows, and like I would just like, a lot of times I would look at myself, check myself out. And I had one time somebody called me like, you're such a narcissist. You're always looking at yourself in the mirror, right? The truth behind that entire story, I don't know if I've told this story, but I remember growing up, often I would look at myself like in a window or like a mirror of a car. And I remember one time some person said to me, like, you're always checking yourself out. Like, you're such a narcissist. And the reality behind it was I would look at those car windows or mirrors and look at myself because I didn't feel right in my own skin. I thought I looked different. I must be different. I didn't feel right. So a lot of times I just looked at myself to make sure I was okay. Like I do look normal. I do fit in. So once again, like this concept of being a narcissist, I'm sure they're out there. Maybe I've met some, but I couldn't tell you who they were, because to me, being narcissist sometimes is somebody that's driven by ego. And as you mentioned, a lot of times they don't maybe take feedback. They're not very open-minded, but a lot of people aren't open-minded. Yeah. So it's these personality disorders. I think they do take some time, and we've got to really know like what we're saying or telling people they are.
Yeah. So good discussion, man.
Until next time.
Yeah, you narcissist.